Hello everybody, welcome to this instruction video. This video is for part 3 of the TLC blanket, in which we're learning to crochet step by step. The yarn that I'm using is Scheepjes Chunky Monkey yarn, and in part 3 we're going to be learning the granny stitch. Now, this is part 3, so you're going to be learning how to make the granny stitch, a very classic stitch pattern. And the hook size we're using this week is a 5mm hook. I'll take you step by step through process of learning the granny stitch and how to make it step by step. Hope it's a useful video for you. Thank you for watching. Row 30, you have the right side of your work facing. I'm just going to move the stitch marker up a bit again, because it just makes it easier if it's closer to where I'm at. I'm going to use a new color. This is color E, and join color E in the first stitch with a slip stitch. There we go. Chain 3. This counts as your first stitch. Now we're going to work a second double crochet in the same stitch. So yarn over. So in the same position, going to work another double crochet. It's 2 in the same position. So now you have 2 stitches in this one position. You're going to skip 2 stitches, and then in the third stitch work 3 double crochets. Yarn over, so skip 1, 2 stitches, and here in the third position work a double. That's 1. And in that same position we're going to work 2 more. So yarn over in the same position, you can see exactly the same position. Work 1 and 2 more. So you've now worked 3 double crochets in the same position. And this idea we're going to repeat until we're basically to the other side. So yarn over, skip 2 stitches, so 1, 2 skip, and then in the third stitch work 1, I need more yarn, 1, 2, 3 doubles. My fabric is getting a bit larger. So I'll show you a repeat again. So skip 2 stitches. That's 1, 2 skip. Then in the third stitch, work 1, 2, 3 doubles. Repeat this until you're to the other side. The last few stitches will be slightly different, so I'll see you at the end. I don't need to do the last repeat. But skip 2 stitches, and then in the third stitch you work 3 doubles. Repeat this until you're almost to the end. Almost to the end of the row. Just work the repeat. I need to work 1 more repeat. Yarn over. I'm going to skip 1, 2 stitches. And here in the third stitch work 3 doubles again. And this is my last repeat. 2, 3. At this point you should have 3 stitches left. You're going to skip 2 stitches, and then in the very last stitch you work 2 double crochets. So skip 1, 2 stitches, and here in the third stitch, or the final stitch, the last stitch, going to work 2 doubles. So 1, and I need a bit more yarn, and 2. And there we go. At this point you can cut your yarn and fasten off, so that means opening up this loop. Row 31. Important, you still have the right side facing. You see here's the stitch markers, you have the right side of your work facing. Good, need a new color. This is color D. Attach this yarn in the very first stitch. Now the very first stitch is of course here the chain 3, because you have the 2 stitches, so the chain 3. So and here's the top of the chain 3, insert your hook in there. Oops, takes a full loop and not just, and don't split your yarn. So insert your hook into the chain 3, and sometimes, there we go, this needs a little bit of help. Attach with a slip stitch. Chain 3, 1, 2, 3. Now this again counts as your first stitch. We're now going to work 3 double crochets before the next 3 double crochets in this natural, you've got this natural space here. In that space work 3 double crochets. In here, in this space, work 3 doubles. 1, 2, and 3. Pull my yarn tails a bit. So I've got 1 double crochet, and then I've got this group of 3 doubles. I'm going to skip this group and come to the next space here. So you've got again this opening between the groups. In there work 3 double crochets. And you're going to repeat that until you're at the last group, so until you're to the other side. In this space, this gap, because there's not really a chain stitch or anything, but just the gap that's between the groups of 3 doubles, going to work again 3 doubles. So you're filling that gap with 3 double crochets. You can see how you filled these gaps. So continue until you're to the, I'll see you again at the other side, but in all of these gaps, so all of these, work 3 double crochets. Almost to the end of the row, just work 3 doubles in the 1 stitch, or in the 1 stitch, in the 1 space, this space here. I'm going to go to the next space, that gap there, and work 3 doubles in that gap. This is going to be the last 3. So 1, 2, and 3. You now have 2 stitches left, 2 double crochets. On the very last stitch, you're going to skip the first one, so on the second one, on the last stitch, you're going to work 1 double crochet on that very last stitch. And that's it. That's the end of the row. Cut your yarn and fasten off. Now again, go back to the start of this row for the next one. Row 32, you have again a new color yarn, color C, and the right side of your work facing. Going to attach in the first stitch, and that's here again at chain 3. So at the top of that chain 3, insert your hook and attach with a slip stitch. There we go. Chain 3 for the first double crochet. And in the same stitch work a second double, so 1 more double crochet in the same position. So here in the top of this chain 3, insert your hook to work another double. So now you again have, I'm just going to pull the yarn tails a bit, now you again have 2 double crochets in this first stitch. I'm going to start the repeat units. and it's the same idea as before. In the chain 3 gap, or not the chain 3 gaps, the gap in between the 3 double crochets, in those gaps going to work 3 doubles. So you're going to come to the, so you have the first 2 groups. In that space there work 3 doubles. In that space, not this space here, because there's no room here, because then you would be increasing stitches. So it's important you're going to skip this first group, and in that space work the first group of 3 doubles. So that's 1, 2, 3. And this you're going to repeat till you're to the other side. So in the next gap, in this gap here, again 3 doubles. So that's 1, 2, and 3. So I've now worked 2 groups of 3. I'm going to continue in every space work 3 double crochets, and I'll see you at the other side for the last few stitches. Almost to the end of the row. I have one more space here. I'm going to work 3 doubles in that space. That's 1, 2, and 3. So that was the last repeat. At this point you have one group left, this group, and you have a final stitch, this final double crochet. You're going to skip this group, and then that last stitch, you're going to work 2 double crochets on the last stitch. 1 and 2. You can cut your yarn and fasten off. Cut your yarn and then pull through. Now again, back to the beginning for the next row. Row 33, you can already see it here in the dark pink yarn, is a repetition of row 31, this row here. So for row 33, you're going to repeat row 31, and the color that you're going to use is color F. Again, I encourage you to use the written pattern for this part, and if that doesn't really work, go back in the video and it's exactly the same stitches as in row 31, only use color F. Row 34, I've already worked the row here, and the pink stitches, the light pink stitches, is a repetition of row 32, so 2 rows down. So you're going to repeat these stitches, and the color that you're going to use is color B from your kit. So for row 34, repeat row 32. And again, if the written pattern is perhaps a bit too difficult for you, you can go back in the video to row 32. Row 35, I've worked here in the dark purple, is again a repetition of row 31. So this row you've already worked twice. I'm going to work it again, and this time in color E. So repeat row 31 in color E for row 35. Row 36, I've worked here in the light purple, is a repetition of row 32. So you've worked this row a few times already, and this time you're going to repeat row 32 using color D. So for row 36, repeat row 32 in color D. Row 37, I've worked it here in the light pink, row 37, and that you're going to be working in color B. 37 is a repetition of row 31, which that you've also worked a few times now. So repetition of row 31 and then work it in color B. Row 38, I'm going to work with color A, so I have color A here, and we're actually going to work another row of granny stitches, but I'll show this to you because at the end of the row we're not going to cut our yarn. In the first stitch, so in that starting chain 3, I'm just going to insert my hook there and attach with a slip stitch. Chain 3, that's the first stitch, and then in the same stitch work a second double. And I'm going just a little bit faster perhaps because you've done this quite a few times now. Skipping the first group, come to this space here and work 3 doubles in that space. And continue until you're to the other side. Work 3 doubles in every space. And at the end you're going to work those last 2 doubles and then not cut your yarn. That's very important, but I'll show you when we get there. So repeat, work 3 doubles in every row, and like I said, this is in essence a repetition of row 32. And again, almost to the end of row 39, so I have my last few granny stitches to work. 2, 3 trebles, skipping this group and then come to the last stitch and work 2 double crochets on that stitch. And very important now, leave your yarn attached. So leave your yarn attached because we're going to come back in the next row with again color A. Row 39, you have the wrong side facing, and we're going to start with a chain 1. In the first stitch work a single crochet. So this is your first stitch, and on every subsequent stitch as well. So in every stitch work a single crochet until you're to the other side. So this creates a nice starting point for the next parts. So continue, work a single crochet on every stitch until you're to the other side. I'll show you the last few stitches as well. I have a few more stitches left. So work those last single crochets. And here on the starting 2 stitches as well. This is the full stitch, and then here you have the starting chain 3, so just poke your hook in there somewhere at the top and work the last single. You can cut your yarn, and I'm perfectly at the end of a ball. Look, this is what I have left of my first ball, so I'm going to throw this away and open up the loop. Brings us to the end of part 3 already, and I'd like to show you how to work away yarn tails again, and we'll look at size. Yarn tails, let's have a look at them. There are quite a few on both sides of your blanket. Let's just have a quick look. I'm just going to turn my work around so I have the wrong side, the back of my work facing, and I'm just going to grab one of these yarn tails. And what I like to do for when I'm working granny stitches, I like to, in the first real stitch here at the bottom, that's where I like to work away my yarn tail. So I'll just show you what I mean by that. Just thread the yarn on your needle. So if this is the back of your work, I go through the back of the stitches, like so. And then I work my way to the bottom of the first granny group. And now I work a few times back and forth until I feel okay, it's nice and secure. Because with these granny groups, you've got quite a few stitches here at the bottom, so you've got quite enough yarn and fabric and room to really push through a few times. And like I said, I always do this quite a few times because then I know it's nice and secure. I'm happy with that. So I'm just going to cut my yarn. There we go. And this, and now really from the front, I mean you can't see anything, and that's exactly what you're going for. So work away all these other yarn tails in the same way. So I would do it there and there and there. So then you just thread your yarn through. And so work away all these yarn tails on both sides, and then I'd like to look at the size of the blanket. Here's the blanket at this point. At this moment your blanket is still 125 centimeters long. I mean, nothing has changed about that, but the width is now about 36 centimeters, give or take a centimeter. And you'll notice that if you have to do a bit of effort to get it to lie flat. Maybe here this part 2 with the linen stitch, maybe just have to pull out a little bit, but as such your blanket should be able to lie flat at this point. So if you have a lot of bobbles, that means you have issues with tension. Don't worry too much about that. That comes with practice, that you can get your tension even, because that you work everything with the same tension, and then your blanket will be flat. But as such, at this point, this is what your blanket looks like. You've got all the fundamental stitches we started with. Then you learned linen stitch patterns, and now we learned granny stitch patterns. Brings us to the end of part 3. Next week, squares.